Welcome to episode 167 of Prose. This week, embrace change and become death and poison. This week I will forego our usual introductory bits and bobs, just to say that, after a long struggle with some technology woes, I am back on social media and touching down with all things prose in a regular fashion. As such, I hope you will follow the show there. The show can be found at Prose Podcast across all social media platforms. Okay, that's enough introductory doings. Let's get to the tale, shall we? This week, we have The Poison Well. Enjoy. The Poison Well, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. Animals began dying from the well's water at least 5 years ago. Those farmers who did not have their own wells or access to any of the mountain streams way out on the edges of the forest lands, a great many arduous hours' walk each way, did as we all did. They drew from the town well right in the center of our village. It wasn't until the smaller beasts started to die that anyone began to take notice. But even then, none of us really cared until the larger animals also began to drop off steadily. Chickens, then dogs, and cats, then pigs and cows, and so on. Simi Howson was the first of our number to go. She was just 3. We'd never had any problems with rotten water before. Of course, we'd heard tales, but those were from irresponsible villages, dirty villages, impious villages, haunted or cursed or damned villages. Not ours. We were good, honest folk who did good, honest work. In fact, we worked so hard and so much that our hands were rarely idle. As such, there was not much time for mischief in our ranks. The worst of our sins generally came in the form of some of the younglings dipping their fingers in a pie cooling on a windowsill, or someone telling good woman Piney that her new shawl she had knitted was the most beautiful shade. Good woman Piney had a penchant for the most bright and outlandish colored knitting, which defied fashion sense and made the garment far more expensive. She even knitted my mother a poplar berry red shawl once. No matter the cause or the case, Simi's little body was what truly alerted us to the stark reality that we had a major problem coming our way. She was found rigid, in her backyard where she was supposed to have been at play. Her lips black, her body stiff and contorted, her face locked in a permanent howl of pain. Simi paid a debt for us all to know for sure that the well had gone bad. And if the well was bad, that meant that it was likely our other groundwater had gone bad too. We were in trouble. Chinson Charnsik, one of our local tinkers, came up with a stopgap solution. As it turned out, that stopgap would become our way of life. Goodman Charnsik had traveled more than any of us had in living memory. Out nearer the fabled cities and heathen frontiers, he had seen the men and women of those lands heat their water until it roiled and danced. Yes, Some was lost to ether upon heating, but what was left was often fine to drink, no matter how sour or pestilent it was to begin. Goodman Charnsick also learned of pushing water through the char of remnants of wood. He called it filtering, but all we knew was that if we combined our efforts between heat and coal, people did not die from the water of our homeland. Goodman Charnsick himself repeated the process daily for well nigh a month, drinking the worked upon water himself, just to demonstrate to us all real living proof of the power of his method. A few stubborn holdouts went ahead and kept drinking after Semi passed. There are always those lambs who cannot stay with the herd. Most of those that kept drinking after our discovery died within weeks of Semi. Goodman Frassus, Goodman Pike, Hjulte, the shepherd boy. All men, stubborn, self-involved men. We also had a couple call Goodman Charnsick's process witchcraft. A couple more called him a warlock and insisted that he must be the one poisoning our well, if he could so readily solve the problem. But these scant few were ignored, or, when they pressed harder or looked as if they might seek to do harm to the Goodman, openly ridiculed and shunned by the village, ensuring they softened their take to our heat and coal method we were employing for the drinking water. The process was laborious, though, and rather time-consuming. Goodman Charnsick taught everyone as best he could, and he oversaw as much of the project as he had the time or energy to. But mistakes were made, corners cut, resources dwindled, people died, plants began to die from a blight no doubt connected to our sickly water running through the veins of our land. My own part of the story really begins with a lazy evening. It was long after we all generally seek the comforts of our own hearths and lock the doors against the night. But way had led on to way, and I had not drawn the water for my mother, brother, sister, and me at my usual time. So I found myself heading to the well to get some of that blighted water. We were already all but out of the cleansed stuff, and that lengthy process meant that the four of us would likely have to be without water until a full day later. I groused to myself, at myself, as I made my way to the center of the village, sure-footed even as the shadows lengthened and deepened, even as they enveloped the entire world around me. I had often thought that I could walk the village blindfolded. I knew every turn and bump and corner and rise and fall. So wandering into the village with no vision seemed to me like something easily done. My wager was that I could do somersaults, eddying through without a care. The absurdity of my plight that night was that safety is what changed me, what nearly killed me. Ever since Semi was given back to the earth, the town elders didn't want any accidental moments where water got to residents on accident. In other words, they didn't want anyone inadvertently stumbling and falling into the well itself. To avoid such a double catastrophe, they drug out little sawhorses they had hung dyed red wool scraps from, their attempt to alert anyone that they were approaching danger. In the night, I do not know why they thought the red wool would mean much of anything. The darkness made the color just another shade of gray-black to the eye. Red dye was expensive to purchase because it was notoriously difficult to produce, too, so the expense seemed frivolous and poorly reasoned. But this was our first time grappling with any real danger or tragedy as a community. So maybe their ill-conceived attempts to protect us were all understandable. Still, all the red dye in the world wouldn't have saved me from my dim-sighted, in a rush, bumbling. The very waist-high blocks that held those flecks of warning red were the instruments of my own fall. The very waist-high blocks that held those flecks of warning red were the instruments of my own downfall. Quite literally. My confidence was too high, and, in all fairness, I should have been more mindful as I made my way, no matter how well I knew the terrain. Put simply, I bumped into one of the sawhorses with quite a bit of force, dropped my water-gathering jugs, and went headfirst down the well. Fortunately, amid my drop, I at least had the wherewithal to squirm to get my feet under me. My head took some scrapings and bumping from the well walls, but at least I did not land on my head. Water or no, that would have been my end. Still, the impact hurt. I hit feet first into the water, and though the poisoned stuff cushioned a bit, I still hit the ground of the well with my feet, which sent shocks of pain into my knees and spine, even as I did my best to crumple and allow my entire body to take the force, rather than just my legs. It hurt. The jolt sent what little breath in my lungs whooshing out of me, and I gasped, snorted in out of a natural need to snag some more air to refill them. Instead of air, I got befouled liquid. Mind you, it did not taste any different than a clean mouthful of water. But that was what was insidious about the pestilence. It could not be seen, smelled, or tasted. I spluttered and spattered and did my best to spit out as much as I could, but I'd taken in a lungful, bellyful, and mouthful, and then some, amid my struggle to regain composure after my fall. The seasons hadn't given up the heat of summer fully just yet, but down beneath the earth and in the darkness and submerged to my chest, I was cooling fast. No one would be out to look for me until morning, as the village was long since gone to bed. I knew that I needed to figure out my best path to getting out of this well if I wanted to live. The cold whispers sweet nothings, but the cold kills, or so my grandsire used to tell us. I did a head-to-toe assessment of myself. Nothing broken, save my skin in a few places. And then those scrapes and cuts did not go too terribly deep. Bleeding, but not so much that I would fear going into the darkness from blood loss alone. My legs would hurt to the moon and back tomorrow, but right now, they seemed like they would function. Everything else was, to my surprise, in relatively good working order, even with all this getting roughed up. The walls of the well weren't like a city well, not that I would know. Goodman Chinchun, the brickmaker and stonemason, used to tell me of how the stonemen in the grander cities took time to smooth out and make artwork of even the walls of wells or the stones laid in the ground to provide an unshifting road in those great places. We did not have such need for beauty that could not be seen, and our work was always piled sky high. So our well did not have the chipped and smooth stones that you would see in a city well, and I thanked God for that. Since our forebears had used rough stones on our well, I would have plenty of foot and handholds to get me moving upward and toward the mouth of the well, back into the world of motion and night. As I began my clunky, painful ascent, I was honestly thankful for the focus required not to take a second painful fall. The damp, cool stones made for less than ideal gripping, and that slipperiness called for my full concentration. If it had not, I might not have had the ability to keep going. The thought that I was a dead man already might have weighed too heavily and tempted me just to lie down and die there in the wet and the cold. Many of my neighbors had died from far less of our well water than I had just ingested. We had also not ruled out that the poison might leach into our systems through other means, say, open wounds or through washing. I was full of the bane, and I had soaked in the bedeviled stuff, allowing it to thoroughly wash my open cuts and tears from my fall. But at that time, it was just left foot here, right foot there. Left hand finds hold, right hand finds another hold. Repeat. The journey up the well wall took an eternity, or so it seemed to me. The shadows of the deep night were still out and in full life when I finally pulled myself out and over the lip of the well. For a time I sat with my back to its stony wall, ignoring the pokes from the uneven stone and catching my breath, still not allowing my mind to go running in any direction close to my inevitable death by poison. Once my chest went from heaving to shallow, gasping breaths, I reassessed. I was hurt. My whole body screamed from the fall and the subsequent climb. I had taken in a great deal of the poisoned water. That was just it. I had no recourse. I had come to the well in the night to take care of my family's need. So I resigned myself to doing just that. I gathered the jugs from where they had been flung when I flipped over and into the well, proceeded to fill them up, taking care not to repeat my idiocy, and hobbled my way back home. This time, I did not let my mind wander or hold on to any hubristic notions that I had any talent for blindly traversing the expanse from well to home. Once back, I began the process of cleansing the water so my family could have something potable in the next day or so. I had to stay busy. I couldn't think on what was to come. My family would find a rigid body somewhere amid our property. Lips black, body stiff and contorted, face locked in a permanent howl of pain. That was my doom now. It was not to be avoided. As I was pouring the remnants of the second jug into the miniature reservoir that would be heated and made to be a place of renewal for the water, I held back a small mugful. I poured that last little bit of befouled water into my own cup and set to studying it. In the dim light of our dying night fire, it looked like any other water. Though my eyes wanted to make it black or crimson, seeking something different or ominous in this deadly stuff. It wasn't. It looked to the eye just to be water. No wonder little Simmy did not know any better. How could you? The invisibility of the monstrosity of the bane was insidious. Yet, as I stated and sought an answer to the why of all the deaths that had come before and now my own inevitable demise, I felt compelled to drink it. The contents of my mug called to me. I tried to push the desire away, thinking maybe I had gone a touch mad during this eventful evening. Maybe I was feeling like hastening my death might save me pain. Maybe I was thinking that the more poison the better for ensuring I was gone by sunrise, not to make my family see me waste away at speed like many of the other victims' families had. Whatever it was, the call was too much. It vibrated in my guts and bones. I drank. With all the puttering I had been doing, I had thought that surely someone would wake in the cottage, but no one had. I was trying to be silent in my toil, but we four did not live in a grand home with halls and rooms aplenty. Even so, no one so much as stirred. I took that as a sign that I was meant to serve my family this way one last time. Gudmundsson water ritual was started, and I had now picked up and swept around our common area and the hearth. My family would awake tomorrow to find a very clean home and a nice ration of water well on its way to being consumable once again. I thought that dying there amid the cleanliness and in a place of so many songs and stories around the hearth fire would befoul our place, making me a poison to it just as whatever curse had fallen upon the well had done there. So I saw myself outside. I loved our little plot of land. It wasn't much, but we grew vegetables and the occasional fruit when the seasons were kind. Our chickens were roosting and burbling quite contentedly. The dogs were asleep. Such sentinels they were against the terrors of the night, though I could not begrudge them their rest. We had not had a chicken taken by any creatures of the evening, in as long as we had had the 2 hounds. It was out here that I would lie down and sleep one last sleep, touching the earth and thinking back on a lifetime of love and laughter. Hard work too, but never so much as to snuff the light out of the joy of being a family. I lied down there on the southern side of our plot with my face to the east so that the dawn would illuminate me for anyone walking by or coming out of the cottage. I hated that someone would have to find me like they did little Simmy and all the rest. Such horrible sights they had all been. But it was better to find me in the light of day than amid the weighty evening. My heart had never ceased pounding, even now, long after my fall, climb, stumbling home and chosen nighttime chores. If Gudmundsson was to be believed, that would only expedite my expiration, the poison creeping through my veins at an accelerated rate. I tried to keep my breathing measured and think comforting thoughts. I tried to slow my heart. I tried to sleep. And the God was kind. Sleep came. As I lost consciousness to go to whatever other worlds we traverse when we depart in the night, I thought of what a shame it would be to not be around for the Mid-Autumn Festival. It was my mother's favorite. I loved watching her clap along with the jigs played on fiddles, and delight in both the crispness and the roasted harvest apples, and the very air itself. She was one of the few in the village who did not get a little sadder with the passing of the warmth into winter. Mother always knew how to celebrate the here and now, rather than take it for granted. I held those memories of her love and joy as I drifted into the darkness. Imagine my surprise when I woke up the next morning. My mother and siblings were gathered around, shaking me. I came to with a headache and a body that felt like I had been dead. My body hurt far beyond what it should, even with my fall down the well the night before. Once my eyes opened and I gave them a reply, they all calmed a bit and thankfully stopped shaking me. However, they were not fools. They could see that something was off. Moreover, they told me, in an excited, overlapping babble, that I had to go look at myself in the reflection of the burbling water being cleansed over the low fire. I had them help me to my feet, and I stumbled to do as they bade. Upon leaning over the water, even with the uneven surface, I could immediately see their cause for concern. I looked like Simmy's body, like all those bodies, at least in part. My lips were not quite a jet, but they were the color of ash working its way toward full black. My hue all over followed much of the same pattern. Had I not woken and stirred and answered them, the cause of my death would be quite apparent for all. But I had woken and stirred and answered, and I walked among the living, albeit in great pain and confusion. I related the events of the night before to my family. My brother and sister called me a fool. My mother cried out in alarm several times when I told my tale. She sent my younger brother to run to Goodman Charnsick's cottage on the far northwest corner of the village to bring him to us. She wanted him to look me over, even if he was not a physicker. She also knew that he was not as superstitious a man as many in our community had turned out to be. She did not want them coming for me, or it getting out that I had somehow become something else. The entire morning passed in a blur that I scantily remember now. My brother fetched Goodman Charnsick with all haste, and the two were back in no time at all. They must have run as fast as either could. Goodman Charnsick took great care and great interest in looking me over. He said that my lips were already turning the same color as the char that we had to push the water through in order to make it consumable once more. The beds of my nails were getting darker by the minute. The whites of my eyes were growing grayer and would likely be fully blackened in no time. Yet I stood before him breathing, jovial if in some pain. He could not believe it. He could not explain it. He had never seen or heard of anything like me in his travels. Goodman Charnsick lauded this as good luck, though, even as he was concerned that my thirst to consume more of the liquid grew. He thought that maybe the blight on the water was passing. Maybe this indicated that the poison had lost its potency and might be slowly leaving our lives. It was a comforting thought, but it was a fleeting one. He was wrong. That same morning, 3 more of our number died from having taken in the well water without going through Goodman Charnsick's rigorous process, making my own survival despite a baptism in poison all the more confounding. To their credit, the people of the village did not cast me out or come for me. They avoided me as my hue darkened to unnatural shades of gray and black. But they did not come for me with their scythes and knives. If anything, they saw me as a possible test from the god. They wanted to see if maybe, just maybe, I was blessed and could somehow act as a scapegoat of sorts, taking in the poison from the well and cleansing it for good. I was the same color as the charred wood, after all. My cold skin might be a filter sent from the god to have a living being be able to act as an embodiment of Goodman Charnsick's process. And me? I drank and drank and drank. I couldn't get enough of the blighted water. It became an unquenchable thirst for me, my driving force throughout any given day. Despite the villagers thinking I was more blessing than curse, I did not want to test the boundaries of that belief, so I kept my consumption to myself and only indulged in private moments. I got to see my mother celebrate Mid-Autumn after all, for which I was grateful beyond measure. However, I hurt. I could feel a tingling, burning, itching, throbbing throughout my skin as if something were crawling through my veins, trying to break out from inside me. I could feel the poison dancing through me, coursing in and out of my heart. And yet I drank more and more. After Mid-Autumn, despite the air being increasingly icy, I began to bathe in the well in the evenings. I came up with elaborate reasons why I had to walk well into the night, and I devised an equally elaborate system of lowering myself down into the dark waters, so I could submerge myself, taking in bellyfuls of the poison and letting it seep into my every pore. My communing with the water, which is the only way I know to describe whatever it was that I was doing, seemed to both ease the pain for a time but then make it grow more acute in the interim between my baptisms in the black of night. The more I had, the more I wanted. There did not seem to be an end to my thirst, and there did not seem to be an end to the poisons coming from the earth. Our well was a good well. It had always given forth water for us. That did not cease to be. So I could consume as much as I wanted, and the town would have plenty. Poisoned, yes, but water that could be made pure again nonetheless. Much better than some villages whose wells would go dry and leave them to have to abandon their homes in search of a better vein to tap. The village continued to raise me up like a totem. More so, the more ashen and charred I became, the more bits of skin flaked off of me. They wanted me more visible. Rather than hide me away like they did the lepers or the dying, they bade me to stop working. They provided for my mother, sister, and brothers so that I could simply be present in the village. I was tasked with weaving in and out of the homes in and around the town. I did not go about blessing my people, strictly speaking, but it was something akin to that. They wanted to see me. They would bring me offerings of sorts in the form of a cup of the poisoned water from which they had yet to banish the death. I became a symbol of survival, a minor god that was to be sacrificed to in the form of drinks of the bane. Small blessings were poured over my head. I became poison. I know this. I know that I became poison incarnate, because I rather quickly figured out that I could not be touched. Whatever venom ran through me would harm other living beings. It took me all of 2 chickens to figure this out. Early on, gathering eggs, I had lifted one of our hens. She did not last the hour, dying in the same horrible blackened state as other villagers and animals had. One more hen, and I put the cause and the effect together and knew that I could not know the touch of others anymore. I was death walking. I myself had become the poison well. My celebrity grows with every passing day. The poison does not dissipate, but neither do I. I grow stronger and more different. The townsfolk adore me, and their adoration is slowly becoming more direct worship. The followers of the god call it heresy. The believers call it common sense. They can see me and how I am helping soak up the pestilence. Where has the god been? What has he done? From time to time, a woman does not believe me, that I am the Lord of Poison, death come to walk. She wants to lie with me in the night. I fought and fought against these liaisons, but the desperate come to me. They have a night of pleasure and ecstasy. We share intimacies that others cannot understand, as poison seeps into them from me. They are always dead by morning, but they, too, are revered by the growing cult of me. Thankfully, I have moved out of my family home and no longer share their hearth, save on rare, special occasions. I am acutely aware of the danger I pose to them. I miss my mother's reassuring touch, my brother and sister's sibling warmth, but they do not need to see these blackened women who come to die by poisoned affection. I am the poisoned well, and I give forth poison for all to drink that would have it. Goodman Charnsick tells me tales of healers
way off to the east. Men and women who might help me become myself again. He tells me of lofty cities that I might go and see. He sometimes tells me that my strange demigodhood that's been thrust upon me might make me formidable in those places too. He has let me see maps with places I'd never have guessed could exist out in the far reaches of the world. I might just go there someday. To those places where I might be healed. Or where I might upset the order and rule in my own right. For now, though, I will continue to revel in our small village and the poison gift curse laid upon me. Lying with women who wish to die by a god's hand, and heaping the praises and prayers of my fellow villagers. Desperate for an end to the scourge of the well.
Thank you for listening to The Poison Well, an original short story by me, Jared I. McGee. All sounds that you have heard throughout the short story come from either freesound.org or YouTube's free music library. Everything is being used under CC 0 public domain dedication licenses. And that does it for prose this week. One long tale in place of the usual two shorter. Thank you for joining us as always. It will be 2 weeks until our next full episode, and I certainly hope you'll rejoin me then. In the meantime, love those around you, tell them that you do, and embrace this life as it is always, stranger than fiction. Thank you so much for listening.